This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar. And we are available wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on YouTube. And this is Dan Naturman. I am a Comedy Cellar comedian. Here with Noam Dworman, the owner of the world-famous Comedy Cellar.
Hello.
Periel Aschenbrand is here. She's an author, comedian, and producer of Live from the Table, and with us remotely via the miracle of Zoom video conferencing, we have River Page. He is a writer at the Free Press. On most days, he writes the daily newsletter, The Front Page, and you can find him on Twitter, or X, I guess it is now, but I still call it Twitter. I also still call the Tappan Z the Tappan Z.
Right.
And
always Twitter to me, yeah.
Pardon?
Is that it's always Twitter to me.
Yes, because Twitter can be used as a verb, like you tweet. X,
right. Yeah.
How do you...
It was ill-conceived.
There's no verb there. Anyway, you can find him on Twitter/X at River_is_nice. River is nice. That remains to be seen. We really don't know him, but he seems nice so far. Welcome, River. Coming from the Florida Panhandle, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, I am moving to New York next month, though. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, we could have had you on then, but then it wouldn't. Then your article that we want to talk to you about wouldn't be quite as current. So we're doing it remotely.
When did the name River?
Well, River Phoenix, I think, was the.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's funny. So my mom actually. So she was 16 when she had me, and she was in class, like in her biology class or something, and. She was like, well, everybody knows I'm pregnant now. She hid it for like 6 months because she was a Baptist preacher's daughter in like rural East Texas. So she hid it for like 6 months, bailed out on an abortion last minute. And then she was like, okay, I'm coming clean. I'm pregnant. All right, what am I going to name the baby? And so the teacher was like taking suggestions from the class and putting them up on the whiteboard or the chalkboard or whatever. And yeah, somebody suggested River. I later learned at my grandma's funeral after River Phoenix, and she was just like, yeah, I'll go with that one. So my first day of high school, I go and I meet this teacher, and she's like, oh, we named you in my class. Like this.
Is this for real?
You know,
Are you pulling? That's
yeah,
an
it's a real
amazing story. I'm picturing. What town was this in?
a little town called Huntington, Texas.
So in Huntington, Texas,
about an hour and a half north of Houston.
This is why they wanted to abolish the Department of Education. Where's Doge when we need it? So the teacher is taking suggestions for your pregnant 16-year-old moms. That's hilarious.
That's right. Yeah,
it's a cool name.
And she backed out on the abortion for religious reasons, you said?
Yeah, for religious reasons. They passed around the hat. So I was at my grandma's wake, okay? So I'm sitting at my grandma's wake. It's like a Scotch-Irish like wake. So you stay at a church, traditionally a home, but like in modern days, you stay in a church all night and you sit up with the body, right? And so we're sitting like 3 feet from my grandmother's corpse. It's like 11 p.m. And one of my mom's friends from high school comes up to me and she was like, we passed around a hat for your mother to have an abortion. And I'm glad that she didn't do it. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. I was like, did she give you your money back? And she was like, she didn't. I was like, well, now's your time.
Your mom is still with us?
Oh, yeah. She's only 16 years older than me. I'm 29, so she's in her 40s.
45. So we should get your mom on the show too.
She literally just called me. I forgot to put my phone on silent.
Should we send her a Zoom link?
We'll call her back. Don't, please. She would hate that I told that story.
I want to meet your mom. And who's your dad?
Oh God.
The king of the prom, the homecoming king. What is he?
No. So my biological dad became like a drug dealer, like a meth dealer. And then he also married my mom's cousin at one point. So I have a half brother who's also like my second cousin on my mom's side. It's a real like redneck, like, these are not usually the type of people who become journalists, but I shit tweeted a lot on
so when
Twitter,
you read
5 years ago.
When you read Hillbilly Elegy, did you identify? Like, I haven't read it, but I just in my own bigoted way, I assume this is like a similar story.
Well,
Like yeah. Go ahead.
I wrote a piece.
Save
about
me
it,
from myself.
actually.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I wrote a piece about it for the Free Press, and I was basically saying that I think it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of gross to like air out your family's dirty laundry to make the political point that JD was making at the time, which is that basically if you're poor, like a poor white person, it's because of your own moral misgivings. And that, yeah, like a lot of things has happened, but like, look at me, I'm, Ivy League educated tech bro, and if I can do it, then these people can too. They're just not trying. And I don't know. I mean, I am somebody who came from a pretty similar background, and I've found, I don't have tech bro money, but like I have like a career in media, and that's not usual. But it's a lot of it was luck and being in the right time in the right place, and like there's like three things that could have gone wrong in my life, and I'd be like in prison or like dead of an overdose. So I don't know. I think he's sort of changed his opinions now, but I don't know. I don't like that book. I don't like
Yeah.
it.
Well,
It rubs me the wrong way.
the argument, I did it so other people can do it too, while there can be something to that, of course. It's
Hmm.
also like a very vulnerable to also biases because first of all, a certain number of people get lucky, and but also like for instance, Glenn Lowry, he's who's a friend of mine and I'm a big admirer of his, but he's a black conservative, and the self help
Hmm.
somewhere within him, is the self help message. And I've said to him, yeah, but Glenn, you're a genius. Like, the fact that you're a genius obviously has something to do with that you made it. So it may not be so easy for the average Joe to make it, given all things being equal. It might be legit to say, you can do it too, or it might just be, well, I'm an outlier because I'm so gifted, nothing could have held me back. You just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like, my success. I'm not really like that. There's definitely people I grew up with who are smarter than I am, who are, working on oil rigs or like
Periel
working in
has the same
logging or
experience. Go ahead.
yeah, but
And
I
yet
mean, I
here I
think
am.
That's a good job, though, isn't it? Working on an oil rig.
it's good money, but it's not, people, even though they probably make more money than I do, honestly, like a lot of them anyway, people perceive, white collar, sort of professional, creative class work, however you want to put it, in like a different way than that sort of thing. And like I got, if it weren't for the internet, I wouldn't have a media career. And a lot of people like me, like who have a similar background to me, wouldn't have media careers because I didn't go to an elite college. I would have never met like Barry Wise if it weren't for the internet, right? Like I would never have met really anybody who's like given me an opportunity in this industry if it weren't for the internet and you know really like Twitter, just like being able to express your opinions and like audition almost like for publications just with an internet connection.
A quick question: do they sleep on the rig, or do they commute back and forth?
My stepdad, who raised me, I call him my dad. He worked on an oil rig for 2 years. He's a log truck driver, but he wrecked his log truck like 2 months after my younger brother was born, and so he had to go work on an oil rig. And whenever he was doing it, you didn't stay on the rig, um, which he was on. He wasn't offshore. He was on like it was somewhere out in West Texas, but it was like on land. But they had to sleep in like these sort of like trailer house, sort of like it was basically like a big like double wide trailer house with a bunch of bunk beds in it. And so it's just like 30 dudes like sleeping in there for like 2 weeks at a time, and then you get 2 weeks off and you come
We're
back
not here to
home.
talk about oil rigs. And I know Noam's probably upset that I changed the subject.
No,
Though I do find it interesting.
it is interesting, and of course, there is certain echoes of the movie "There Will Be Blood," where the oil man picks up the stepchild, and not an oil rig, but oil drilling. That
I've
movie
never seen
somehow
that. It's one
you've
of the
never
few
seen
Daniel
it.
Day-Lewis movies I've never seen. I don't know. I was gonna watch it the other day because I just watched what was the one where he plays like the tailor, like the fashion designer guy, the Invisible Thread or something like that, the Phantom Thread. And it was really good.
So wait, you saw that there was a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, very acclaimed, about a oil man that raised a stepson, and you said, I'm gonna watch
I
American
actually have
Pie.
no idea what it's about. I just like vaguely heard of it. I like just saw it on my suggestions while I was watching the Phantom Thread, and I was like, oh yeah, I should probably watch that.
It's one of the great movies, and one of the
Yeah.
great, in my opinion, one of the great theatrical or cinematic performances. I mean, Daniel Day
Yeah.
Lewis is phenomenal. That movie is just phenomenal. All right, so River and Paige, what's the original Jewish name?
He's no Jew.
You said you worked for the Free Press.
Thank God.
Yeah, well, they did circumcise me as part of the onboarding process. So,
You wrote a column here, or whatever you call it, an article. The online right is building a monster. The subhead is their increasingly extreme rhetoric is eventually going to freak the hell out of ordinary people. This was published recently, February 19th, 2025. So go ahead. Give us a synopsis of your argument.
So I'll give you the short form and then we can get into it. So the short version of my argument is that throughout the 2010s, the cultural left was ascendant. And then it all sort of like you had all these ideas, these crazy ideas building and building, and they were mostly manufactured like through the internet. There's like some academia involved, some other things. It was mostly on Twitter, things that were happening on Twitter in like 2015. 4 years down the line would end up in corporate HR policy, in mainstream TVs and movies, in government policy. And that freaked people out. Once the
Give us an example. Give us an example of what you.
So something like non-binary, right? This is something that like really only existed on the internet for like 10 years. And then all of a sudden it becomes there are non-binary characters in movies. Non-binary people have like a special designation for passports. Like it becomes like a part of whatever you want to call it, like the public-private administrative state and culture. And
when you say it only existed on the internet, you mean that you don't mean that it didn't exist in real life, or maybe you do mean it doesn't, like, or you just mean we're only aware of it because on the internet.
I mean, I don't think that like non-binary to me is kind of like
it's neither here nor there.
If you, I'm not really convinced that this is like a real thing. Like it has no defined meaning. Like, what do you mean you're non-binary? And it's just like, I don't feel like a man or a woman. I'm like, I don't know. Well, you could just be a gay guy. You could be like, I don't know. To me, like, if you say like I'm trans and it's like, okay, you used to be a man and now you're like living as a woman. Like, at least that definitionally kind of makes sense. Non-binary is just kind of like, I don't even know what that means. Because you meet non-binary people who to me just look like regular women usually, or like gay guys. And I'm a gay guy, so I can say that. But to me, so like that's an example of like something that reached a sort of like cultural peak, and then people are like, what's going on? A lot of the weird rhetoric around race, this sort of Robin DiAngelo, like you can't even really be friends with a black person because you should just like feel guilty about, all the time. If you're like a white guy, you can't really like talk about anything without like declaring your privilege. Like all of these sort of weird things that used to be part of internet subcultures, really, like on Twitter and Tumblr, became mainstream. Now, and there was a backlash to that, which I think culminated in Trump's reelection. Now, the same thing is happening on the right, where the right is they have a sort of like newfound cultural ascendancy. They've completely taken over Twitter, which is important because Twitter is the platform of choice of the cultural and political elite of this country. So most Americans aren't on it, but the people who make movies, who write books, who write news articles, who make policy, they're all on Twitter all the time.
The intelligentsia.
Day in and day out. The intelligentsia. And so that is how the ideas got, sort of introduced to the masses on the left. I think the same thing is going to happen on the right. And like, it's concerning because every time you log on now, like to Twitter, I don't know if you've you've been on, and maybe you've peaked your algorithm and like you don't actually see any of this stuff. I don't know how you don't. I see it constantly, and I don't follow any of these people. But it's crazy anti-miscegenation means like people don't want interracial marriage anymore.
Wait, hold up,
crazy
hold
shit
up,
about
hold up. Wait, I have never seen an
I see it all the time.
anti-miscegenation.
Well,
what kind of evil stuff are you guys into? That your algorithm is feeding you anti-miscegenation.
Well, because I took on Dave Smith. That's number one.
But
so did you.
What does he have to do with anti-miscegenation?
Because some of the people that follow him,
which means
some of the people,
just for Periel's sake, it means that white people and black people shouldn't get married.
Don't listen.
Because
I'm quiet right now, but don't
or even mate probably.
Well, because Noam, you know that a lot of people that came at you from called you anti-Semitic stuff.
Yeah.
So you know that when you take on Dave Smith, you're going to get some of that.
Right.
So,
but anti-miscegenation, it seems like a non sequitur to all.
Well, those are the same people because they blame Jews for promoting miscegenation.
Right. Yeah.
There's all kinds of memes saying, that the Jews are responsible for. Well, some people go as far as to say the Jews are responsible for bringing slaves to the United States.
Okay, but there is something. It'd be interesting to reverse engineer it. There is something different in my algorithm and you guys, because I have never seen an anti-miscegenation. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well,
I was teasing about accusing.
Probably because I also at times respond to these people, and so maybe that's the thing. I'm dumb enough to try to argue with.
I mean, is it possible that your porn category is creating a pixel on your?
I don't think so. I don't use Twitter for porn, although one could. I suppose there is porn on Twitter, but that's really not the main place to go for that. I don't think.
I mean, I think the point is that like these accounts are not small. Like I guess you could miss them if your algorithm just goes like.
Yeah, I mean,
really
Jake Shields, anybody,
but like they have like millions of followers.
I'm afraid to look at it.
Well, how do you not get Jake Shields shit popping up on your feed?
I see Jake Shields sometimes, but not anti-miscegenation.
But with Jake Shields comes,
not to me,
among other things, anti-miscegenation.
With him, it's Holocaust denial all day long.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, but as he was saying, the Jewish stuff gets wrapped up in that because they're like, oh, the Jews want like the Gentiles to like dilute the white race or whatever. But like they promote like race mixing for other people, but not for themselves, which I'm like, I don't know. I feel like every other Jewish guy I know is like married to an Asian chick, so it doesn't make sense to me. But
we don't even consider them a
different race. Noam went the other way and married a Puerto Rican chick.
Yeah, that's miscegenation.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, you get a lot of like the anti-Jewish stuff. You get like homophobia, and this is like one of the ones where I feel like it's gotten kind of more mainstream, where you don't have accounts that maybe wouldn't tweet like Nazi stuff, but they will tweet crazy stuff about gay people, specifically gay men. There's this whole moral panic right now. I don't know if any of you've seen this, but there's this whole moral panic right now about it's basically a conspiracy theory that says that gay guys are doing surrogacy to like buy male children to then sexually abuse. And like Sam Altman, there's like a tweet that had like, I don't know, like 100,000 like likes or something, like millions of impressions, which is like accusing Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, just had a baby via surrogate with his husband. And it was a boy, and they were accusing him of basically what I just said, like having a child via surrogate so he can abuse it later on in life. Like it's this crazy thing that like all of a sudden everybody believes that I had never heard like a year ago. I had heard people criticize surrogacy, and like I think some of those criticisms are like somewhat valid, but it was never this. And I think it's partly because like they can't just go after surrogacy. It's like, okay, well we're going specifically after gay guys because none of them are going after Elon for having, whatever, like 12 kids, half of them via surrogate. So it's just stuff like that. You have all these crazy things being developed, and then I think like it's going to reach like a cultural maximum, and then once it does, like people are going to start to get freaked out in the way that they were before. Like when you start talking about things like no fault divorce or like earnestly overturning gay marriage, or even like some like quasi-racial stuff about Jews, whatever. I think like it's going to freak people out. And when you have people like politicians, people who work um in not just the Trump administration, but like in sort of like the right wing intelligentsia, just like enmeshed in this stuff all day, it's really easy. Like I know that like some of the stuff is going to rub off on them because I saw it rub off on people on the left. And I was on the left. I was like a big Bernie Sanders supporter. And I like, I grew up in the working class. So I was like, and I mean, when I was like volunteering for the Bernie campaign, I was making like $14 an hour. Like I didn't have any money. And I like didn't, I had like health insurance, but it was like such a, like, it was so burdensome. Like it was like, I almost wish I didn't have it because it was so expensive. I just couldn't go without it.
With a brutal
And
deductible, right?
right. Yeah. And it was, um, you just have this like constant anxiety, like when you're living on the edge like that. And so I was really supportive of like Bernie and his movement. And I was like, finally, like there's like a political project that could actually materially improve my life in some way. And I just saw it like completely overtaken, especially in like the 20 when he ran again in 2020 by people who were like, oh, he can't go on Joe Rogan because this was AOC said this. Like, oh, Bernie shouldn't go on Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan said that trans women shouldn't play uh, women's sports. And I'm like, I don't think they should either. And also, like, if you want to appeal to working class people, like most working class people are not, uh, they're not, I don't think super right wing or racist or anything. Like, they're not, NYU gender studies graduates. Like, they don't like they don't even think about this stuff really. And it was just like a complete distraction. And then there were other things with like people kind of forced Bernie to reverse his position on immigration, which
And
massively
tariffs. Bernie was all about tariffs.
and tariffs. Yeah, they were like pushing him into abandoning all of these positions that he had held for decades, um, because he had this sort of like class first position, which is that law of supply and demand. If you increase the labor supply for blue collar workers, which is what massive illegal migration does, it's going to drive wages down. Like that's just basic economics. And so,
No, well, it's not. I mean,
um,
just to be fair, it's a contested. In one aspect, from one point of view, it's basic economics, but then there's from another point of view, when you bring in these talented and energetic people, there are responsible economists who say actually no, it's win-win. That it actually, I'm agnostic on the reality of it. I think it probably depends very much on the subset of people you look at and maybe even the geographical location. But I don't. I am not convinced that wages are depressed necessarily by a certain number of immigrants coming in at some amount. I suppose it's probably inevitable at certain jobs. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, there's like studies showing that illegal migration specifically, in really high numbers, suppresses the wages of non-college educated voters, especially like black,
I mean,
who
you could
seem to be the hardest
imagine
hit
a
by that.
scenario where there's such a shortage, the wages go very high up, and then businesses actually can't survive because there's not enough workers, right? So then, I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
Well,
So
there's also the argument that a lot of these immigrants start businesses, a lot of these stores and these bodegas and these types of operations.
I mean, I don't really mean to disagree with you. Like right after COVID, when there was a huge labor shortage, yeah, wages were going up. Like so, there's no like people definitely offer more money when they can't find workers. So, but I don't know that it's. I think it's quite complex. That's all. I think. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that like there's this like big argument that, there's just certain jobs that Americans won't do. And what you find, like, for example, if you take slaughterhouses, this is one of the jobs that supposedly Americans won't do. And so they recruit all these people, many of them illegal immigrants from places like Mexico and Central America. And they come here, and every couple of years, all these big slaughterhouses will have some sort of immigration raid, and they'll come in, and half of the staff will be deported. And the first thing they do is they raise wages, and then they meet they are able to hire people. You just have to pay them more.
Right, but
And
then you have to raise your prices.
Sure, but I mean, I don't think I don't think that, I think it's worth paying like an extra 50 cents or whatever for chicken if it means that like people actually are able to find meaningful work in their own country, I think there are some like things more important than low consumer prices.
Yeah, in that particular example, if it's 50 cents per, I mean, I don't even know. I could see that. There's other jobs like childcare, where at some price of childcare, you can't. Many people are hiring childcare in order so they can go to work. So the differential becomes not worth working, or you really can't. You just can't do it. Like I said, it's complex. Every industry,
Sure, yeah.
Every geographical location has its own reality.
Kind of beside the point anymore.
Yeah,
but
not the point.
No. The point was that just I supported Bernie Sanders. I thought I'm in sort of like a quandary where I don't really affiliate with like either party or really the right or the left at this point, because I would be considered to the right on things like immigration or on trade even. I think
miscegenation. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm socially liberal to an extent, and I support big government, for lack of a better word. I think we should have universal healthcare, like through a Medicare for All program, ideally. I support raising taxes to fund things like Social Security and all of that. I support like big government-led infrastructure projects. So like I'm not, I probably like if I had been born in like 1950 or something, I just would have been like a New Deal Democrat. But like that doesn't really exist anymore, right? Except for like Bernie Sanders, kind of. Point is, I was warning all these people that like your cultural politics on the left, your cultural politics are going to alienate working class people. And I know this because unlike most of the people who were on the left at the time, like in the Bernie Sanders left, like I actually grew up working class. I actually grew up around these people. I know who they are. I know that like Bernie Sanders is like the only Democrat I've ever heard my mom say anything nice about, you know? And it's not because of his position on trans issues. It's because he's like talking about the actual like lived realities of like working class people and offering solutions, even if like they don't agree with like every single one of them. It's like, oh, he actually like does. You actually get the impression as a working class person that he actually does care about you, which is something that people have not felt in a very long time. And I was like, you need to focus on that. All this other stuff, you know how Bernie feels about it. It's not that Bernie was, anti-trans or anti-gay or anything. Like he was culturally left wing, more left wing than I am probably, and like has been since the 90s. But for some reason, they wanted this to be the focus of the campaign, and I think it's because you get when you end up in a bubble, and that's what old Twitter was. It was a bubble because they banned all the right wing people. You end up with people pushing an increasingly extreme party line, trying to root out, dissent within the ranks. And that produces a political ideology that is unpalatable because you're not talking to normal people. You're not talking to anybody that disagrees with you. And I think that the right on Twitter is like in a similar situation now because so many people have just, I think about getting off of it sometimes because it's just gotten into like a weird cesspool and like there's just all this like slop and like it's gotten really bad. So I think that the right is in danger of basically making the same mistakes as the left. Like that's the whole thesis.
Well, so a lot of this, of course, is anti-miscegenation notwithstanding, a huge amount of this stuff is absolutely insane anti-Semitic stuff that we're seeing going around Twitter now. Stuff I have to admit, I wouldn't have thought it was possible. I mean, millions and millions and millions of. I mean, I don't know how to judge the ratio of impressions to people who actually are reading something, but there is some ratio. Let's say it's even a third. It's probably higher than that. Let's say it's a third. It's still millions of people reading this stuff, right? And the most crazy anti-Semitic ideas, all that echo in like age-old tropes of Jewish control, Jewish manipulation of the world into war. I mean, you name it. Candace Owens is, the Jews are, Israel was created as a pedophile haven, and Theodore Herzl wasn't even Jewish, and the Jews killed JFK. Although I think maybe today we finally learned that the Jews are too clever to leave fingerprints on that one. And what are the other? I mean, there's just so many of them, right? And then you have what's particularly disturbing to me, of anybody probably sick hearing me say this, but that it's not, you can't really decide who's crazy and who's not anymore, because if the nose of the camel is kind of like Joe Rogan, who's kind of, acceptable in the tent, but if you start going backward, he goes, he's attached to this one, to that one, to that one, that one, and the asshole is, Jake Shields and Dan Bilzerian, and you can't have the head without the ass. Like they're all attached to each other. They won't say anything bad about each other. And then I will say, because I've been agitating, I don't see many of the important voices, many of them Jewish, not all of them Jewish, who would be screaming bloody murder about this stuff if it was coming from the Joy Reid show. If it was coming from the left, this would be not even worth discussing. They'd be salivating and pouncing all over it. They find themselves in a dilemma, about how to handle this stuff when it's coming from the podcasts that also help Trump get elected and stuff like that. And I'm very disappointed in what's going on. I mean, I think that there needs to be a full-on civil war on the, I don't know if want to call it the right, but on the people who hate the left. That group of people who have kind of mobilized against the left and found themselves holding their nose and either voting for Trump or kind of happy that he won because, of the stake through the heart of the left. That group of people that needs a label, they cannot live together in peace. They should not be living together in peace, because you cannot tolerate this kind of anti-Semitic conspiratorial nonsense within your ranks. You just can't. No serious intellectual school should be able to tolerate this, and obviously they are tolerating it in some way. You agree with my spiel just now?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think that it's sort of weird, because I remember seeing a lot of people just really going in and being like, "You're an anti-Semite, you're crazy, blah 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 blah," for just people who were on the left who were criticizing Israel. Some of them were Jewish, and it's I don't know. I think
just let the record. Just hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just let the record show. I'm not really talking about Israel here, although Israel certainly is an issue. Obviously, anti-Semites are attracted to
yeah.
But I'm really not talking about the people who are criticizing Israel or anti-Israel. I'm talking about the people who are saying much more deeply serious things about the Jews. They're not objecting to Israeli policy. I'm talking about people who are saying that the Jews, was on Tucker, that the Jews installed Winston Churchill to be prime minister to pursue Jewish interests and push the world into war. Right? This is Hamas. The Hamas charter says the same thing, by the way. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. No, I think the point I was trying to make is, I think in the in America, there's kind of left-wing anti-Semitism or right-wing anti-Semitism. And I think the left-wing version, which is more just kind of is more like focused on Israel. I think some people like just don't like Jews and like like show that sometimes. But I feel like that's gotten a disproportionate amount of attention when like the most like blatant fucked up stuff I've ever seen about most about Jewish people are from people who are like on the very far right, who also like they don't like black people, they don't like gay people, they don't like like they don't like anybody, and like it's
Well, a lot of these people don't have any problems with gay people, but go ahead.
yeah, uh, maybe so, I don't know, but
Some of them do. Some of them are very, libertarian, quote unquote. Some of them are more religious. But
can I ask? Is this monster that you qualify is being created on Twitter? Is it an anti-Semitic monster, a racist monster, a homophobic monster? All three in equal measure? Which is the dominant thread? The dominant.
I actually like refer to it as like in the piece as like a Frankenstein's kind of monster. It's just this like conglomeration of like all these like different off-putting things. So it's like you have like the racism, you have the anti-Semitism, you have really retrograde views on like women, you have some like extreme religious stuff that's not like, not just like we should have a nationwide abortion ban, but they also think that, but also like birth control should be banned, which like, like I grew up Protestant, Baptist, like that's not even a thing. Like you're allowed to use birth control, you have really extreme religious stuff. You have anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia. It's like all these like different things taking on this really weird form. A lot of stuff about women, like just like demeaning to women. The sort of Andrew Tate thing where it's like, it's this weird thing where you have like conservative Catholics who want to ban the pill in league with like Andrew Tate, who's like this sort of like, I don't even what is his ideology, like Islamo decadence or something like that.
Who is this? I mean, I know who Andrew Tate is, but I've never heard him. What does he stand for? Why is he famous?
So he was a MMA fighter. He was on Big Brother UK, and he was, well, he runs like a sex cam business in Romania, and he kind of rose to prominence by
a sex what?
Sex
sex
cam.
cam, like
He had like all
type.
of these girls who were like basically enslaved to working for him, and he does this like whole spiel about how he gets the girls to fall in love with him, and then he like kind of like controls them.
And how do we know they're enslaved?
Well, I mean,
Well, that's the allegation from the Romanian government.
I see. Okay.
But he's also been like, he's been accused of rape by like a lot of different women. There's like lawsuits going out. There's like a video, alleged video, I don't know what I need to say, of him like beating a woman. He like bragged about punching a woman at a face at a bar in a video one time. Like he's not a good guy,
You mean like Kamala Harris's ex? I mean, what was Kamala Harris's husband's name? How quickly we forget.
Yeah, I know, right? What was his name?
not Doug. Not
Douglas
It
Emhoff.
was Doug Emhoff.
Doug Emhoff was accused of punching his girlfriend in the face, spun her around. But go ahead, sorry.
No, this
Yeah,
guy. I mean, I'm not familiar so much with that story, but this guy's like at like a Weinstein level. Like there are so many allegations against him, and you just watch him talk. I mean, he says horrific things about Jews, about women, about.
I saw his brother talking to Candace Owens about Stalin and Lenin being Jews, but I haven't seen.
Well, Lenin was a quarter Jewish, I believe.
No, I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure. Anyway.
I'll look that up. Go ahead. You guys talk about
Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought, River.
But yeah, so you have this weird movement where, you have Andrew Tate and conservative Catholics, on the same team. And so it's like, well, what are they going to find in common? Because like now these people are like in a group together, and like the things that they're going to find in common are like anti-Semitism,
Hating Jews.
ChatGPT says there's no historical evidence that Vladimir Lenin was 1/4 Jewish. Naturman. That's what it says.
Oh, okay.
It somehow knew that you were the. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
So they're going to like come together on like, varying but different like retrograde views on women. They're going to come together on anti-Semitism. They're going to come together on like, homophobia, things like that. And like it's going to like I don't know, like it's just like all of these things like accumulate, right? It's like you can't say it what an exact
Oh
point
wait, then
like
it says it might be true.
wokeness.
Sorry, there is something. I don't want to go ahead. I'm reading it. I read it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Are we talking about Lenin being
Yeah,
Jewish?
but we're
Yeah,
getting
I hate.
off.
I don't want to. I don't want to purvey disinformation or misinformation. So I like to get it right. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can go to Red Square and we can do like a little 23 and maybe we can swab his mouth or
Oh, we should. We
do
should.
yeah. Um, no, but you really can't say when like wokeness freaked out the public. You just know that it happened. Like it was this growing sort of building thing where like it's just one weird thing on top of another weird thing on top of another weird thing that builds and builds over time where all this and then at a certain point people just say like, yeah, I'm not on board for this. And then they you know,
Well, I
they
think what
freak
you
out
said
and then there's a
before.
backlash.
I think what you
And then
said
things
before.
swing in the opposite direction. It's this oscillating sort of thing that happens. Go ahead.
No, I think what you said before really resonates, that like they took these issues that in and of themselves are important, like that people should have like safe bathrooms to use or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And they made those like these huge issues that
You did it too.
Well,
Sorry,
I still
sorry,
agree.
sorry.
I mean, I do think that everybody should have the bathroom that is safe for them to use. But I can also recognize for the vast majority of Americans, this is not like the main thing that they care about in their lives. I think that that's what people rejected, right? That if they didn't make this huge production out of all of these things, then I think the pushback wouldn't have been so forceful, right?
I mean, the concept of first world problems really doesn't get enough attention. Like, really, at some point, the things that we turn into our major issues,
Yeah.
they really do. You really can't infer from them a certain level of prosperity in general, because during the Depression, there's just no way an issue like that could rise to the top. People have too many more important things to worry about, and it's a problem of psychology to lose perspective. But in many ways, we have trouble keeping perspective on just how wonderful life is in America for huge numbers of people. Which is not to say that people are not struggling. Like, don't get me wrong, but there's no way, especially in a party like the Democratic Party, that they could spend all their time focusing on these,
Right. When like people
Yeah.
can't.
boutique issues. If the groundswell was, no, we need better wages, we need this,
Or we need
that.
health insurance, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't afford like cancer medication for our children. Like those things are really important to all people.
The problem is that all those things, which are all real, they now all seem to be reduced to a small enough percentage of the population that they don't rise to become, kitchen table issues anymore. There's just there's not a critical mass of people anymore who are suffering these problems, which then we are responsible to be more attuned to these things, because as their numbers diminish, we still need to look out for people who are suffering, but somehow things in America are quite good.
River, I guess do you predict? So I guess you said you predict a backlash, but another possible result would be that these ideas filter into the mainstream, and I guess a third possibility is they remain on Twitter, which, as you just said at the beginning of the podcast, most Americans aren't on, and there it stays. So.
I don't think it ever stays on Twitter. Nothing's ever stayed on Twitter because all of the people who create culture are on there. And so that's how it becomes part of mainstream culture. And that's when you have a backlash. Like there wasn't a backlash against the massive like cultural backlash against some of the more radical trans stuff, like trans kids stuff, until it reached like a cultural mass where all of a sudden it was like no, like we're gonna put like a trans child on TV. We're gonna do like all this. We're gonna do all that. And like then all of a sudden people are like, this is weird. I don't like this. And then like that's how it happens. It's like it has to actually reach, in my opinion, like the culture is like cyclical and like there's these massive oscillations that happen over time and they have to reach like a critical mass. And then once they do, people in like inner mainstream culture, that's when people start to be sort of weirded out. And then things sort of like start oscillating back the other way.
But the difference is I don't see filmmakers making movies that reflect these crazy conspiracy theories, racist ideology, etc. Or maybe they. I mean.
Well, there is this conspiracy theory that Snow White wasn't actually white. Have you seen? Have you seen this? I.
She Jewish?
No, there's a new Snow White movie.
She's
Let
like
me just
Colombian
say,
or something.
what's that?
She's like Colombian, I think.
I
She's
don't know.
Latina,
Something
right?
like that. Yeah, she's Latina. Now listen, let me, just for the record, I couldn't care less. Like it's such a.
Isn't Snow White a cartoon? I don't understand.
There's a new live action movie,
Okay.
and the Snow White. I saw ads for it in the airport. The lead actress is clearly not white.
So what? Who cares? What's
Well, of course. So what? Who cares? Except that the name of the character is Snow White, as if she's nicknamed that because she's so white that like it's like trolling in a way. Like I don't care because I mean who cares, right? If the movie's good, the movie's good. But there's something. It's like when they wanted to make James Bond black. It's like okay, I don't really care, but James Bond is a particular character with a particular demographic profile, and Snow White is named. I mean, maybe I haven't read the fairy tale lately. Maybe there's some other reason that maybe her last name was White.
I just think it's funny. Maybe they should be calling.
Well,
her-
Steve White, the comedian, is black.
Yes,
There
a
was
lot of black people are
backlash
named
to
White.
that.
But anyway,
Too,
so I was. But getting back to that point, there was a backlash against wokeism.
It's like what can I just say, Dan? It's like I used to think they should remake Pinocchio,
Right.
and Pinocchio should say, "I want to be a real girl." like just to troll everybody. Like Pinocchio is a presents as a male puppet, but actually he wants to be a real girl because he's trans. Wait, I dare you to complain about that, Periel.
Right, like
Why
the
can't
tits
Pinocchio
just
be
keep growing
trans?
or something?
Why
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
Snow White be Hispanic?
But
I just like the idea that Snow White's name might be So White instead of Snow.
it's just silly.
well, wokeism.
It's like Snow Blanca or whatever.
woke-
But yeah,
woke-
no, like there was a backlash of that. Like the Daily Wire tried to make. I don't know if they're still making it. I don't know what the status is on that. But they were like, we're gonna after it was announced that Rachel Zegler was going to be in this movie, and that they weren't going to do the Seven Dwarves. They were going to do like seven. I mean, it was like a woke movie. They were going to do like seven magical creatures. I don't know. They casted these people. They all look like crackheads. It's really weird. You just have to look it up. But the Daily Wire was like, we're going to do an unwoke version. We're going to produce an entire feature-length film that is like a different woke version of the new live-action Snow White movie from Disney that hasn't even come out yet. Like that's the level of like reaction and counter reaction that we're living in now. And that's why I'm saying like there's going to be like a backlash because there's a backlash to everything. Like it's this thing that like keeps going back and forth and back and
But
forth.
for there to be a backlash, the monster that you talk about has to find its way into mainstream culture.
All right, wait, stop the presses. I did a deep
Okay.
research on ChatGPT. Lenin's maternal grandfather was Alexander Dmitrievich Blank. That means the father was named Dmitri. A physician in the Russian Empire. Blank was born with the Jewish surname Srul Moiseyevich Blank. In the early 1800s, in his youth, he converted from Judaism to Russian Orthodox faith around 1820, adopted the name blah, blah, blah. He did this to access educational and career opportunities, and Lenin was raised as a Christian, 100% Christian. But yeah, technically, if you believe in the blood, Lenin has 1/4 Jewish blood. Dan is correct. You are correct,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. The way that so the thing is like I think people have like a really old idea of like what mainstream culture is. So like Joe Rogan is mainstream culture. right? And he like just had a guy, he just had two guys on in the past like 2 weeks who have said the guy who was talking to Tucker, who was talking about Winston Churchill being, you know, the actual villain
Right,
in World
Daryl
War II,
Cooper.
or what, Daryl Cooper. Yeah, he was on Tucker. Tucker also had a guy on who is like promoted the idea that Israel did 9/11. It's like the whole dancing Israelis
Who
thing.
said that?
And
Ian Carroll, was that?
Ian Carroll, yeah.
He didn't say that on the Rogan show, did he? That he's. I don't think he said that
I
on the
think
Rogan.
he
believes that,
alluded
yeah.
to something about Israel and 9/11, but like it's like other videos he's like specifically talked about like the dancing Israelis
He
and all
said
that
definitely
stuff.
that Jeffrey Epstein was a Israeli honeypot operation that controls world leaders. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like Theo Von, he had like, Candace Owens on, it was like 2 weeks ago. I mean, like, and these guys have bigger audiences than like the average CNN broadcast or the average like network TV show or, whatever. So like this is mainstream culture. And this is how like it enters, the sort of like crazy far right stuff enters mainstream culture. And I'm saying like Rogan's a Nazi. I don't think that. Um, but
No, I don't think. No,
this
I
is
don't
how
think
things
anybody
like
thinks.
enters,
Nobody thinks Rogan is a
you know,
Nazi.
yeah.
I mean, I know people who know him. I don't know him, and I would, I'm sure he's not a Nazi, or any. I mean, that's an extreme, or that he some kind of seething anti-Semite. I think that Rogan believes these conspiracies. That's the Occam's razor explanation of what he's doing, is that he is open to many conspiratorial ideas. I believe I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I believe at one time he was even open to the idea that we hadn't landed on the moon. And
Well, Mel Gibson was on saying that they found a cure for cancer, but they're keeping it under wraps. And he seemed to he didn't push back on it. He seemed to sort of agree with that.
yeah, he's extremely open-minded. So, and he curates his show, obviously, and he, he believes that some of these theories are true. But, that's not okay with me, because when you are putting your stamp of kind of approval on historically very, very dangerous ideas, and the people who you are presenting and creating obviously big followings for them, even if they limit their presentation on your show to the narrow confines of kind of more innocuous or more believable. I mean, I'm sure it's not true, but that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad plant. Well, like, even if that is somehow considered to be, more believable as conspiracies go, you've created a fan base for these people, and then they get to present these much more dangerous ideas to their fan base, and I mean, it's very, very dangerous. It just is. It's filtering down to my kids. They're aware of it.
But by predicting a backlash, that's sort of relatively good news. You're saying that most of America rejects this kind of stuff and is not going to be persuaded by it.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you talking to, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm talking to
You're
you,
looking
sorry.
over there.
Yeah, but
yeah, no, I think there will. Like, I don't know when exactly it'll happen. I think it'll probably be a gradual thing, but I think it's just there's going to be a point where it's not just like one thing that it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, that weird guy on Rogan, whatever. Like, people can like, you know, I don't think that's enough to bother people. I think it's when it's one thing on top of another thing on top of another thing, and then it becomes associated like pretty directly with the Republican Party. That's when you have like a real political problem. In the way that like all of the woke stuff became associated with the Democrats, even though Joe Biden like was never, you know, he wasn't like AOC, right? He's like a moderate, that it just became so associated with the Democrats that it took them down. I think that's going to happen for the Republicans, because, and probably more quickly, because I mean, all the stuff that's happening on um, Twitter, Elon owns the site, and he's like one of the most powerful people in the government now. And it's not as if he's like ignoring all this stuff. He, I cited in the article, he he like fire emoji quote tweeted something calling Tom Hanks a pedophile. Like that's like a crazy thing to say, right? And that was like the day before I wrote my article. I was like, I wasn't even looking for stuff. It just popped up on my timeline. He also, a Wall Street Journal reporter found that one of the Doge employees had tweeted, normalize Asian hate or Indian hate, had said that like you couldn't pay me to marry outside my race, said like I was racist before it was cool, like all of this like, racist stuff. And um then they rehired him, and JD Vance went on TV and like was like scolding the journalists for, reporting. They were like, "You're trying to ruin a young man's life." I'm like, he's a government employee. Like, I don't know. Like, if you were working for the government, if you're old enough to work for the government and like make decisions that affect millions of people, like you're old enough to be named in a Wall Street Journal article.
Of course.
I don't
I
know,
mean,
like,
he can certainly explain himself, and maybe, he can explain himself, and we say, okay, he was a kid, but, but yeah, of course, if you're representing the people, you shouldn't be associated with stuff like that. I was racist before it's called. It goes without saying. People have lost their minds.
Do you want to
Yeah,
talk?
and I think people start to lose touch of all of these like Republican politicians and like the Republican intelligentsia, the influencers and stuff, even the ones that aren't like and maybe would never be like super far right, like tweeting about Zionist occupied government at 3 a.m.
Right.
The ones that would never be that type of thing, like you like build up a tolerance to that sort of thing where it doesn't really bother you anymore, and so then you become like yeah, I'm 2 degrees removed from somebody who says like this crazy stuff, and like I don't even really think about it. I mean, Kash Patel, uh, the director of the FBI now, in between like his last job and like what he was doing now, he was going on like straight up QAnon, like real actual like QAnon podcasts, and being like, I think Q had some good points. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Why are you even like talking about this shit? Like, and I get,
Yeah,
I think,
so I said we have to wrap it up, but there's part of me that says, well, good, because if these people are also associated with enough like prima facie nutty ideas, it does dilute the effect that maybe some of some of the ideas that I'm more concerned about will have.
Did
like,
you want to discuss?
like I'm kind of happy that Tucker Carlson talks about aliens and being mauled by demons, because then at least when he says that the Jews did this or Jews did that, a certain number of people will say, I'm not really going to take any.
You want to talk about Rogan, who recently sort of alluded to, or he didn't allude to it. He said that, well, if China can be Chinese, then why can't Poland be white? And Elon on Twitter said that was a good question. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I want to
dive into that.
I want to talk about two things, but I got to go. First of all, I want to say about that. I don't know if Rogan spoke carefully there. If by that he meant that China wants to be Chinese and Poland wants to be Polish, I get that. I don't think and Jews want to be Jewish. I think this is not hateful for people to love their own the culture that's imprinted upon them through childhood. I think this is a part of being human, and it's almost ridiculous to pretend that that's hateful. If he meant white, then that's more problematic. But I don't know that Poland wants to be white. I don't even know. So I don't know. Like the French want to be French. I mean, yeah, people want to be. Culture is real. Anyway. Of course, the subtext also is that the Poles are looking out upon Europe, and in a very practical way, which I think deserves even more respect, is like, this is not working out for Italy and France and Germany and Sweden. Like, what do we need these problems for? What country would make the decision and say, yes, let's go in that direction and bring in a lot of migrants from all over? Look how famously it works out, because the ugly little secret is that the people you're bringing in don't want to be Polish either. That's really the problem. And that's that. Now, America was for forever The one exception to that, where the people we brought in deeply did want to become American. And although there were bumps along the way, that did work. And it did work that people, Italians and Jews and Irish or whatever it is, who were fighting each other overseas, although they had, certain resentments when they got here, they did somehow form, there was a melting pot, and they formed a nationality in common, and that's real. I've been worried about whether or not that is still happening with modern immigration based on things we hear said and American flags being burned. And, even today I heard some woman at Yale or something, I'm going to work to defeat America. But, it's like, this is very disturbing. I don't know if it's fair to amplify these anecdotal stories into a trend. I've spoken to my own employees a lot about this. The answers were not comforting, actually, in terms of how they feel about America. But no one said, like, death to America. But anyway, that's number one. Number two is, I just want to say one more thing before we go. River, I'll tell you this. Dave Smith, we had a whole fight with Dave Smith. And he really fucking was mean to my friend Dan. And it's been bothering me now for days. And I feel like Dan should not have taken this lying down. You need to stand up for this because, the fact is, Dan, if you were to wear a wire, or if you were to send somebody out wearing a wire, to speak to our peers, the comedian world, and ask them, what do you think about Naturman as a comedian? What do you think about Dave Smith as a comedian? I think you would be very happy with yourself in terms of what your peers would say about you behind your back. They'd say, Naturman's crazy, he's on the spectrum, blah, blah, blah. But you got to give it to him. He's fucking funny. He's a great joke writer. Not one person would say anything negative about your comedy. Not one. I can't imagine it. I mean, I've spoken to people a million times about comedians in general. You are one of the most respected comic minds there is working in our industry. Yes, you may not be a household name. What can I tell you? But Dave created a tremendous glass house for himself on the issue that he chose to try to humiliate you on. And I think you should take a fucking sledgehammer and smash that glass to pieces.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it for me.
Well, I just want to say, because it really bothered me. It really bothered me. You made a comment about him personally, but it was a personal comment based on the issue, which was him personally. The issue is, why isn't Dave Smith criticizing other people? And Dan said, well, I think maybe he's, audience capture, which is not, the most horrible thing that anybody's ever said to each other. It's not like, you didn't humiliate him. You didn't try to bully him. And then he quote tweets this ugly stuff about you being a failure or whatever it is to activate a cadre of bullies, fucking bullies, just to pile on, and just stomp their heel all over you like you had it coming to you or something like that. This is this above the fray guy. What kind of fucking shit was that? And the assumption is, well, I mean, Dave would never do something like that if he were not, if it's just like not by acclamation of one of the best comedians in the country.
Well, like I said, I think you did. You did. You defended me far better than I could. So
It really bothers me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your vigorous defense.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. River, you're coming to New York at some point, right?
I am, yeah.
Well, we're here in Greenwich Village, the heart of gay America. So I'm sure you'll find yourself down here at some point, and we'd love to. No offense, I don't know what you can say anymore.
No, we actually we met one night.
Oh, we met it. Yeah, you do look familiar.
Yeah, when the party that we had at the cellar. Yes. And I was outside and I was smoking a cigarette. I gave a cigarette to Susie, and you were like scolding her for smoking.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm anti-smoking and anti-miscegenation. All right. Well, very nice to see you again. I have like face blindness sometimes, but I think I know this guy. All right. So when you get back to New York, let's meet up and keep fighting the good fight. Thank you very much, River. I wish I had a name like yours, River Page. I mean, it's such a fucking great name. All right. Take it easy.
Really?
Bye.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
man.
Bye. And podcast at comedycellar.com. Bye.